Good afternoon, Principal Sir and Bhushan Sir. Have you already joined?
Yes, madam. Sorry, sir. Yeah.
Hello,
Okay,
ma'am.
sir.
Yes, ma'am. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
So, very good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I welcome you all. Respected guest speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Roshni Udyava, an architect, academician, and environment consultant, a former principal and now the director of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti, Dr. Usha Mukundan, madam, our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Bhushan Arekar, sir, and entire team of IQAC. My vice principal colleague from the office, Captain Praveen Nayak, sir, my senior teacher colleague, Professor Dr. Vilasini Patkar, other teacher colleagues, and my dear students. On behalf of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti's RJ College of Arts, Science and Commerce, and on behalf of IQAC of RJC, I, as a principal, extend a very warm welcome to each one of you today on this World Environment Day for a lecture organized by IQAC with our guest speaker talking on Green Campus and Paperless Office. Environment nurtures us all and has given us this beautiful life. It has given us air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, clothes to wear. And if you think deep, you realize that the tools and the technologies which human race has used for its progress from uncivilized jungle boy to a civilized human being is also somewhere gifted by nature by means of some or the other examples. What is expected of us in return to this unconditional love showered on us by nature is to take care of that nature, conserve it in the most pure form with similar love and affection. I congratulate my IQAC team for having thought of organizing this lecture on this World Environment Day, and Dr. Usha Mukundan, madam, who has been instrumental in having this pleasing personality like Dr. Roshni with us to deliver a talk on Green Campus and Paperless Office. I thank madam, and I also would consider it as proud privilege for all of us that before our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Bhushan Arekar, gives a formal introduction of our guest, that Dr. Usha Mukundan speak a few words on this World Environment Day, and under her leadership, the green initiatives are taken by RJ College. So I invite Dr. Usha Mukundan, madam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dear Roshni Yahude, welcome to Junjunwala College. And also, thank you very much for auditing our campus, for the Green Campus audit. Till now, I have been interacting with you only through telephone. And today I had the opportunity to see you live, and a pleasant smile greeted all of us. And that shows your love for the environment. And I'm very sure that you will ensure that the planet, which is always very beautiful, will remain very beautiful for the future generation also. Greetings of the day to ensure that each one of us, in our own way, contribute to the well-being of the by following some very simple practices. And today's lecture, I think, will pave the way towards making our campus where we spend most of our time as a green campus, and also to reduce the usage of paper, which again comes from the trees, and in turn it is also a very big what you can say a very big amount of water which is being used in finally getting us the product that is paper. So on behalf of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samitis, Ram Niranjan Junjanwala College, I extend a very warm welcome to this young entrepreneur, Rashni Madam, to our premises, and I request Dr. Bhushan Arekar, IQAC coordinator, to formally introduce her. I also thank the entire IQAC team for their enthusiasm and all the staff members and students who in their own way are trying to follow eco-friendly ways. So once again, extending you all a warm welcome. Over to you, Bhushan sir, for the formal introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to our chief guest, Dr. Roshni Udayvar Yahuda, who is going to speak on the topic of Green Campus and Paperless Office. Dr. Roshni is an architect, academician, and environment consultant whose core competency lies in energy and environmental design of buildings. She has done her PhD in resource management on structural configuration and thermal behavior of building, SNDT University, Mumbai, and obtained a master's degree in architecture from the Academy of Architecture, Mumbai. She is a qualified master trainer and empaneled expert on the Energy Conservation Building Codes of India, awarded by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. She has completed a course on renewable energy as a catalyst for regional development organized by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Israel, November-December 2018. Dr. Roshni is director of Roshni Udayvar and Associate, President, Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research, Mumbai. She is also trainer. She has also served as head operation for the project on promoting clean and energy efficient cold chain in India for MP Ecosystem Advisory Private Limited in collaboration with Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, New Delhi, and University of Birmingham, UK. She is principal investigator in the DST Department of Science and Technology Government of India project on developing energy efficient and ECBC compliant opaque wall assembly for warm, humid, and hot dry climate in India. She has garnered wide range of practical experience in environmental research, pedagogy, and implementation from 1997 to 2003 at the International Institute for Sustainable Future, a United Nations NGO DPI affiliated organization based in Mumbai and New York. She has traveled widely for professional presentation, lectures, and study program related to sustainable development in 20 countries. She was the team leader for the project of developing a roadmap for the implementation of energy conservation codes by the Rachna Sansad Institute of Environmental Architecture in 2013 to 2015. She was also part of the team that developed the Eco Housing Rating Green Building Technical Criteria for Pune and Mumbai in collaboration with International Institute for Energy Conservation Science and Technology Park Pune and USAID. She has delivered lectures at the University of Vienna, Austria, and Arizona State University, US. She has also lectured at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and Hong Kong University as part of series entitled Situating Urban Sustainability in 2009 to 10. She was part of the United States Agency for International Development sponsored Indian delegation to study green buildings in the United States in 2004. As a writer and a professional, she has numerous articles and writings to her credit in various journals and books. At the 34th International Conference on Passive and Low Energy Architecture 2018, December 2000, Hong Kong, she received the Best Paper Award for paper co-authored with Dr. Archana Bhatnagar entitled Assessment of Thermo-O-Drain System on Thermal Comfort, Study of an Office Building in Nashik, India. She co-authored the book Survival at Stake, an anthology of essays by Rashmi Mayur in 2012. She is committed to local and global sustainability through creative, educational, and professional initiatives and appropriate technology with an emphasis on equity, scientific thought, and ecological values. We have amongst us a very vibrant, well-known personality who is going to deliver a talk on green initiatives and paperless office. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. Now over to Roshni, madam.
Thank you, Professor Arikar, Dr. Himanshu, and of course, Dr. Usha Mukundan. I think she's a great leader in thinking about Green Campus. I know that you've already done a lot. So first of all, I'm delighted and I'm honored to be part of this college and give a lecture here and talk here. It's a great pleasure. I give my warm greetings to each and every one of you on this day, that is World Environment Day. And we have today a presentation on Green Campus and Paperless Office, which I'll be talking about. So let me firstly share my presentation. While I'm opening it, I just wanted to say that I would encourage all of you to ask me a lot of questions. I would prefer discussion. So I'll be talking about roughly 45 minutes. And after that, we can have the presentation after discussion. Sorry, just a second. Okay, I hope everybody can see the presentation.
Yes, madam.
What I'm going to cover today is look at the background, why we are looking at Green Campus and Paperless Office, which of course I'm sure all of you know, but I'm just going to emphasize the points. What is a Green Campus? What is a Paperless Office? What are the steps, etc.? What are the components of it? We will look at that. We will look at some of the accreditation standards and benchmarks that are referred to for doing this, the process of how it is done, very briefly, what kind of feasibility can be looked at in terms of compliance and and also the commissioning. And finally, I will show you some case studies, basically of school buildings or buildings which have achieved which have become green. And all through my presentation, you will see lots of images and examples because that's how I prefer to give my presentation. So to start with, I want to show this diagram, which is from very old National Geographic. Right now, the situation is far worse than this. But just wanted to point out to you that if you look at India here in this global map, and China and many other places, you will see this reddish color, and that's the increasing carbon footprint. As a developing nation, we are rapidly increasing. I mean, although per capita consumption is low, our overall consumption is increasing, and that's the world is looking forward and looking at how we can reduce our carbon footprint. So that's one of the first things that makes us that. And if you look at the global scale, we are fourth. So even though our per capita is small, we at the global level, our carbon emissions are fourth in the world. And the recently released World Meteorological Organization's report in 2019 gave us a very clear picture on what will happen or what is happening already if we don't do anything about climate change and all the global carbon emissions that are being left out. For example, the storm surges, the increase in the intensity of precipitation, the sea level rises, and the submergence of coastal areas. All these are all on the cards, and we can already see that happening. So, and they concluded in this report that if we do not do anything about all of these, then by the end of the century, the carbon dioxide, the global temperatures will rise up to 3 degrees centigrade. And then the consequences will not be in our hands because the whole global system will be in a different state. This, of course, is the rise in temperatures, which you all probably know that from something like 270 to 300 ppm pre-industrial, we have gone to above 407 ppm in 2018, and that has resulted in a sort of a greenhouse effect, and therefore the temperatures at the global level are rising, and all of the effects because of that are being faced. We ourselves have seen cyclone Tauktae very recently. In my whole lifetime, I'm a Bombay person, and I've never seen a cyclone this bad. Especially if you're living in a high-rise building, you can feel the pressure of the wind, and it seems that we are going to expect many such events in the future, as more and more such kind of heating of the atmosphere and low pressure areas are going to be created in the future. So it seems that this is one way, and we have seen such things happening all over the world, including on the US coast, Florida, the number of cyclones, the intensity of precipitation, whether it is Australia, which never saw flooding, to Germany, everywhere, the intensity of these extreme weather events and the storm surges like Venice being drowned is happening more and more. And that's because we are not doing much about our emissions, and we have to adapt also at the same time to these climate change events. More disturbingly are these events which are happening, such as the receding of glaciers in the Himalayas. There are so many glaciers which are receding, and that means a permanent depletion of the ice, which then melts and provides water to the rivers. And this is scary because our entire food security system, not just of the India, but also of the entire Indian subcontinent, is probably dependent on these glaciers. So there can be long-term consequences for which we need to start preparing right now. Coming to buildings, because as an architect, I'm mainly involved with buildings. And when we talk about green campus, we are also talking about buildings or spaces in which we live and which we do a lot of work. Today, we are all stuck in our homes or office. Most of us are working from homes. So we are living in these buildings, and what are these impact of these buildings? Apparently, almost 30 to 40% of the global greenhouse gas emissions is because of the operational life of buildings, in the operational life of buildings. And you can see that 1/3 of the global energy use happens in buildings. We use a huge amount of materials. 40 to 50% of the total flow of materials in the global economy is because of the buildings. 12% of global water use, and that does not include water which is used for construction and construction materials, plus a whole lot of waste, not only just debris, building debris, we also generate a lot of other waste, that is municipal solid waste, bio waste, hazardous waste, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are the outputs of living in these nice buildings, which are good, but then we have to take care of all these impacts as well. So if you see, the built environment is next only to agriculture in its overall impact on the Earth's ecosystems. The World Green Building Council, which works towards making buildings green, has concluded in 2019 that almost 39% of all carbon emissions are because of the buildings, of which 28% is because of the operational life. So once the building comes into operation, then the fans, lights, and ACs, etc., they all consume 28%. And the rest is the embodied energy, that is the concrete that we use and the bricks and everything. So that is what the World Green Building Council says. These two graphs here are from India. If you look at the top graph here, you can see that we still rely 56% of our energy comes from the dirty coal, which as you know, when we burn, releases carbon dioxide. And the second graph shows you that these buildings, whether it is schools or others, that consume almost 30% of the total electricity, primary electricity. So our role, our job is to do, first of all, to reduce these fossil fuel emissions by making the buildings energy efficient and also use alternative sources of energy. Just to give you a picture of educational buildings, see what is the total footprint of educational buildings in India is about 31%. So that means that much number of buildings are either schools or colleges or institutions of learning, And there is a huge potential here in terms of the electricity percentage. So if you look at the whole of India, each campus going green, then we can greatly reduce, the output or the footprint of the carbon footprint of India as a whole, if we do something about the school buildings, educational buildings. We must also not forget that there is a change in this type of buildings. On the top row, this is what our traditional buildings look like. And today our modern buildings look like this, something like this, where people are wearing very warm clothes and then they use a whole lot of air conditioning. I'm not, saying anything against either this old one or new one. But the point is that while we provide very good quality of the spaces inside the buildings, it is also important that we remember that there are ways in which we get natural light, natural ventilation at the most, and use minimal of the energy, the resources, and so on. So what is this concept of green campus and paperless office? Let's look at that. What are the various components? So first one is the paperless office, which I will talk a little bit later. There is energy management that one can do, managing the operational energy inside the building, water, whatever water we get into our overhead tanks, the solid waste that we ourselves generate in the buildings. We can try to have better visual and thermal comfort, because that has a direct correlation to not only the productivity of students, but also the energy efficiency of the building. We can look at improvement of indoor environment quality, which is, we can also have look at the pollution in case of, some kind of air or noise pollution, how to reduce it in the buildings through natural or artificial means, increase the vegetation and biodiversity, and reduce the overall carbon footprint by either assessing at an individual level or at the college level. So these are the various things that one can do. So I'll go through them one by one, giving you a little bit of examples first of all. So to begin with, the principles and our goals for a green campus are: how can we become self-sustainable? That means not depend on municipal infrastructure, for example, reduce our ecological and carbon footprint in every possible way, have a holistic and systems-based approach, and not look at one problem at in individual in separation, in isolation, looking at repairing if there is an ecosystem imbalance, or if there is something that can be repaired, how can we do that? Socio-cultural, meaning having community dialogues, having interaction with the users, involving the school and the school community in this whole process, considering circular economy, so having recycling of everything, reduce, reuse, recycle, and finally moving towards nearly and net zero in every possible way, that is in energy, water, and waste. The world is now moving towards net zero. And so I will give you an examples of all of these as we go further. So begin with energy efficiency. So there are three parts to energy efficiency. First is the building itself, the building envelope. So there is a roof, there is a wall, there's a glazing, all of these. There's a huge potential in the way they are, either in terms of lighting, because there are buildings which do not have enough natural light, and then we use a lot of lighting, artificial lighting, and consume energy. Or there are roofs which are bringing in a lot of heat. So, again, so all of these things, if you have a good envelope, that's the first point of making a building energy efficient. The second is improving the equipment. So having LED lighting, having energy efficient HVAC, having star rated HVAC systems or equipments, that is the second thing. And once you do these two things, you are almost having a high performance building. If you are able to do these two things, then you can shift the balance of the energy requirements into renewable energy, and you can even come to nearly zero or net zero energy buildings. So these are the three things that one can do. Just to show you about daylighting and visual comfort, I mentioned this aspect in the beginning. There are lots of schools and colleges which do not realize that they have a good beautiful source of natural light. They cover it, they block it, and then they use a lot of artificial light. This is not only bad for the students and the faculty, but it also is, you're putting using extra energy. And we have seen that energy consumption due to lighting can be very significant if you're not using the right kind of lights. So this can always be reversed. We have found that simple things can be done to enhance the natural lighting, even if it's an existing building. Sometimes you can open up, wells, light wells, like by creating a skylight, by adding something or clearing up some skylights, or creating light wells. Various things can be done in order to enhance the daylighting and reduce the dependence on artificial lighting. Then, of course, if you want to make efficient equipment, then you have, the LEDs is top of the line today. So you can see this is the rating for different, from incandescence, we have moved to CFL and now LEDs. There is brushless DC fans in terms of energy efficient fans. And in terms of all equipments today, we have Bureau of Energy Efficiency's rating, star rating. So you can start with minimum 3-star at least in order to have a high performance in terms of efficiency. I wanted to show you that there are different kinds of lights here, like compact fluorescent. And the third line you can see is the light emitting diode, which is the LEDs. And you can see they are good because in terms of toxic effects, there's no mercury going into the landfill sites after that is post usage. Their life is quite long, which is a big advantage compared to any of the lightings here. And their efficiency is quite comparatively good when you look at all the other sources. Of course, there are some lights like T8 and T12 fluorescents, which are still on the higher side in terms of efficiency, and therefore they are still being recommended. But so I would say this is the way you can choose your lighting systems. Here I want to show you the energy performance index, which is the EPI, or the kilowatt hour or units of energy per square meter of space for a 1 BHK house, how it was reduced by energy efficient equipment. So the EPI of this house was 144. And if you see, by adding the efficient geyser, efficient AC, efficient fan, efficient fridge, how the EPI can come down to almost 77. And mind you, this does not include the renewable energy. It can come down to 30. If you have a good envelope, it can come down to 15, which would be almost a nearly zero energy building. So you can bring down your EPI significantly by moving in this direction. What is the nearly zero energy building? It is identified by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency as a building having an energy performance index of less than 15 kilowatt hour per meter square. This is how the government of India defines it. The European Union also has its own definitions, but this is very, very good. I know there are communities in Europe, for example, Freiburg, which have achieved this 15 kilowatt hour per meter, entire communities where they're not using more than this. Of course, they are very highly well-designed passive houses, and therefore they're able to achieve this. But this is one of the targets. In India, we have one very good example of a nearly zero energy building, or a net zero energy building, the Paryavaran Bhavan itself in New Delhi, which because of various measures, including 75% of natural daylight, and also the entire solar panels on its roof, that it generates 930 kilowatt peak power. It is actually a net positive building because it is giving energy back more to the system. So this is a very positive example. In water management, we can look at rainwater harvesting. That is, there are various things we can do in rainwater harvesting. We can look at water efficient equipment. And of course, if you have the space, then also water recycling. So in rainwater harvesting, there are two things that one can definitely do, especially since we receive something like 2,200, average annual rainfall in 2.2 meters of average annual rainfall in places like Mumbai. Almost whole of the Konkan belt, we get something like average 2,500 to 3,000, which is a huge amount in 4 months. So we can either store it if you have the space, if you have the money to put into storage, then you can have storage tanks, or you can recharge into the ground. In cities like Mumbai, we don't have a single spot of non-concrete surface. And because of which we don't have any groundwater. We were once only reliant on wells and bore wells in the city, and all these have become dry now. A few are still active, but it makes sense to recharge the water and let it go into the ground instead of it going into the stormwater system and running off. So our goal is to reduce the runoff coefficient of the water and to recharge the groundwater wherever possible. In rainwater harvesting, simple things that one can know is to start with catchments. What kind of catchments do I have? The roof is a catchment, the lawn is a catchment, the road is a catchment. So everything can be turned into a catchment, provided you think about the cleanliness and all of these aspects. What cannot be cleaned should not be used. Where you think there's a pollution, avoid it. Then there are these downtake pipes which act as channels. You need, of course, filters and first flush devices. And then, of course, you can do groundwater recharging. There are specific techniques. You need to also know the geology of the place and so on. And of course, one has to be careful while putting water into the ground. Unless it is treated and we are sure that it is clean, we should not do so. So there are numerous case studies, numerous projects that we ourselves have done, 100 housing societies at least, in which rainwater harvesting has been completed and useful, especially because many of them depended on tankers for their water. Apart from water harvesting, we can look at water efficient equipment, from adding a simple flow restrictor which hardly has any cost, or having a sensor based tap, or using dual flush which uses 3 to 6 liters instead of 20 liters. In case of high-rise building, we can use pressure regulating valve to avoid leakages. And for irrigation, instead of your mali watering and wasting a lot of water, you can have drip irrigation. So one can shift into these water efficient equipments, or even have sprinklers. And if there is space, among all the wastewater treatment systems, I recommend the decentralized wastewater treatment system, which uses both anaerobic and aerobic methods, and it uses the reed beds or the roots of the plants, of certain plants, to oxidate the water and to improve its quality. And this has been very effective. This is one of the best, the Living Machine. There's a system called the Living Machine, which was invented by Dr. John and Nancy Todd in the US. It's called the Living Machine because it comprises of these kind of large sort of plastic containers in which you have various types of plants growing, and each plant cleans the system or removes some kind of pollutant from the water, including there are snails and other things if you think you have certain types of pollutants. And the best thing about this kind of a wastewater treatment system is that children from the school also learn about wastewater. They know that their own wastewater from the toilet is being recycled. So this is one of the interesting ways in which you can do wastewater treatment. When it comes to waste, solid waste, the first thing is segregation. That is a must in every school, that you separate your dry and wet waste. I'm sure that is already being done here. Then treating of the organic waste doesn't require a lot of space. People are always concerned about odor, about rats and about mosquitoes. But believe me, now there are a lot of vendors in the market providing very good technologies. Nothing, no rocket science here. It's all there for you to use. And of course, tying up with some kind of local Raddiwala or a vendor. We don't have any dearth of these people in India with whom you can collect all your recyclables and give it to them. In terms of communication, it helps if you have some sort of a waste segregation in every floor or wherever, so that students are also aware that we have some kind of separators. This can be easily created as well by the students. And then, you can also have waste collection units. There are many different vendors, companies who recycle e-waste, and they are happy to collect the e-waste from the colleges and take them from you on a regular basis. They even do campaigns in different colleges. And in terms of organic waste, I showed you organic composting. You can also go for vermicomposting. You have, if you don't have space, then of course electrical composting is the only choice. If you need gas, you can go for biogas as well. So, and if you have that much quantum of waste as well, good quality organic waste. So depending upon the quantum of organic waste, you can go for any different kind of system. Then we look at the pollution abatement. If you have an issue with the air quality in your campus, is it too polluted because of being next to a road or something? What can be done? Can it be reduced, blocked, absorbed? Can we put some kind of a plants or something, natural barriers? Noise levels can be reduced. This can be done either by using tree buffers, or you can even have materials which either absorb or they reflect the noise, so that overall noise within the campus is reduced. And if you have any water bodies which are contaminated within the site or next to it, you can also think of treating them. Indoor environment quality, there are many things one can do, but the best and the simplest thing, and it has been proven that you can use indoor plants. These are plants that I'm sure all of you have seen: Dieffenbachia mina, spider plant, money plant. These are all good plants which purify your air. We have done a lot of experiments on Dieffenbachia mina and spider plant, and even this golden pothos, which shows that they have ability to reduce temperature, they can absorb VOCs to a great extent. So these are simple techniques, apart from the fact that you can have a good natural ventilation to remove the harmful pollutants within an indoor area. You can also reduce your overall carbon footprint. This can be done by first doing an assessment. What is my carbon footprint? If you go to sites like Carbon Footprint Network, and if you log in your details, you'll be able to know how much carbon you consume. And then you can think of various things. You can do tree plantation. You can have like this one, for example. This is a terrace of a building where you have this kind of agriculture system. So this is actually a city farming system which uses waste for growing plants. This is a green wall. And of course, you can switch to alternative modes of transportation, such as public transport. So for example, Jhunjhunwala College is right next to a public transportation node. So that itself is a great point, because most of the people can use this for commuting, which itself is a big positive point. Otherwise, you can use, if you have a large campus like in IIT Bombay, you can use cycles or electrical vehicles to commute. Vegetation and biodiversity. If you have a large campus and there is space for this, you can also go for ecological zones within the campus. You can have small areas where you can have greenhouses, or you can develop special plants which are butterfly and bird attracting plants, or you can have water bodies. Even if it is small, you can see the magic of how it will bring back life and birds and plants. And if I think if students can take this up, and if they can see the results of this, it will be fantastic. In any small place, I would say this can be done, but in large campuses, it's definitely possible. Coming to paperless office, I've taken a little bit more input into this, a little bit more effort than the rest, probably because it's a new concept. So paperless office is, of course, an office environment where you have minimal physical paper and you primarily depend on digital documents. The concept is not at all new. It was there since the time we thought of the first personal computer came into place. So you can have, as a result, paperless employee, one who doesn't use any kind of paper. And all of this is possible through a process called digitization, which of course started with emails, electronic files, and so on and so forth. So this is not at all new. The benefits of going paperless, of course, you are reducing the carbon footprint, you're preventing the destruction of forests, you're saving your time, which you have to go through files and files of paper. Everything is online. You can transfer things instead of carrying bulky files. It doesn't take space at all. It will boost your security if you have a good system, and of course, it will save you money in terms of you don't have to invest on storage and files and everything else. Just to give you a background on the environmental impact of paper manufacture, we all know that the pulp and paper industry is probably one of the most resource intensive industry, and also the most polluting in terms of manufacturing industries. As a raw material, what do we use for paper? We use wood harvested from forests. Mostly they are managed forests. They're not destroying new forests for this. But we also use recycled cloth, wood fiber, and also the waste from sawmills, etc. We use a lot of chlorine and chlorine compounds for bleaching. That's the primary thing. Like if you use a recycled book, like I have a recycled book here, it is brown, and probably people like white books. We use a lot of mercury, organic halides, and other suspended solids. These are the liquid waste that come out. There's also solid waste, such as boiler ash, effluent sludge. And then we use chemicals such as dyes, inks, bleach, etc. Some facts and figures. It takes 24 trees to produce 1 ton of fresh, non-recycled office paper. 42% of all the global wood harvested as of today is used to make paper. There are countries like USA and Japan which are still using a lot of paper. I mean, as compared to them, we are still tiny. So our job is fairly simple, but yet we need to realize that we are a huge country, and we need to make a lot of efforts. In terms of energy, this is the 5th largest energy consuming industry. And in terms of water, you require about 300 to 400 tons of water to produce 1 ton of paper. And of course, the problem with the bleaching reagents that are used is that once they go into the water, it's extremely difficult to remove this agents from the water, especially when they go into natural water bodies. There's a lot more facts here, but to just give you that Indian paper industry is slightly different in the sense that, first of all, it is a century old. It employs a large number of people, especially the rural sector, agro, the farmers are growing plants which are there. I was saying that, well, whatever the Indian paper industry scenario, when we look at future resources, we still have a huge issue with respect to the new resources, for example, where to get our resources. So it's best to, shift to paperless as far as possible. And so that we can have more and more of vegetation still kept intact. This is just to show you that from a paper that I got it, that if you use, in a typical semester, how much amount of paper is used. So according to this survey, an average tree gets converted into 12,000 A4 sheets, and we require almost 300 trees to run a semester. That's what it shows. So we have to remember that tree takes a long time to grow. So that means we are just for running our exams and files and documentation sheets, we use a considerable amount of paper, and that almost amounts to 300 trees per semester. What can we do? We can change in all possible ways. None of these things that are mentioned here are new. Digital signature, digital databases, e-forms, online payment modes, all these electronic mail, PDFs, these are all ways in which one can change from paperless, from paper to paperless. And I have highlighted these 3 points in which one can go. First is to make an inventory of all the processes in your college that require paper. Second is look at innovative solutions, and every college will have its own innovative solution to address each one of these processes, each one of these items. And then finally have them implemented. That's most important. So these are the 3 ways in which we can go. As an example, the NIC, the central government, provides a free software called e-office software, which is, I think, used by several municipalities and government departments now, which allows them to communicate without the use of paper, or at least reduce the use of paper. So this is a good step, and I think that education institutions can certainly follow from here. Next, I will show you a few accreditation standards and benchmarks that we look at when we look at Green Campus. The first one is NAC, which has increasingly become important. The point number 7, which looks at institutional value and best practices. It has several points related to sustainability, which is, what kind of energy source you use. If it is renewable, it is better. LED bulbs are preferred. If you are doing waste management, solid waste, liquid waste, e-waste, all of these are useful. If you have done rainwater harvesting, you get the points. You can start various green practices and also your average percentage expenditure on green initiatives. If you show that you are allocating more for these, this will also be useful. And also, if you have a universal design for access for the disabled and so on, that will also give points. So NAC is one standard that we are increasingly referring to. The National Building Code 2016 Chapter 11 has a whole 8 points on sustainability, all of which we refer to while doing these audits. The Energy Conservation Building Code latest version 2017 for institutional buildings is applicable, so which gives us minimum standards of design for buildings. The BE star rating, which gives you the EPI index, the energy performance index, and what should it be for different types of buildings is also what we refer to. And voluntarily, one can go for different green building rating systems, such as GRIHA, which is Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, which is administered through the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. We have the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We have Leadership in Environmental Energy and Environmental Design. This is an international accreditation. Then we have Indian Green Building Council. We have the World Bank's EDGE. We have ASSOCHAM's GEM. So these are all different ratings which can be applied to school buildings as well. As an example, I've shown here that Good Shepherd International School, Uttarakhand, Tamil Nadu, they have got a platinum, which is the highest rating, IGBC certification. Some of the things you can see that they have done here, they've done rainwater harvesting, solar panels on the roof, which I believe they are able to provide 75% of their infrastructural requirements, such as outdoor lighting through this. Wastewater, green cover, pedestrian pathways, waste management. So all of these things, when you do in your building, you can also get a IGBC Green School certification. So one can also go for that. I'll also show you what is the process of doing a green campus audit. The first step is, of course, the audit of historical data. There is a screening and walkthrough survey. There is a detailed investigation, and then, of course, we prepare the report, which gives the recommendations and the feasibility. So this is the whole process. First is audit of historical data, screening and walkthrough audit, in which, as you can see, it includes energy, water, waste, environment quality, on-site investigation, analysis, and then finally the documentation and report. Some of the instrumentation that is used, at least for the energy audit. And lastly, the feasibility compliance, feasibility for compliance and commissioning, what is done, what are the benchmarks. For example, here you can see 3 different institutions and what we have shown as a benchmark. So for example, you will be able to see which area is consuming more. In this case, the air conditioning is consuming 74%. The lighting is just 2%, whereas in this college, for example, there's 30% lighting. So you can at a glance see which of your parts is, which of the various things is consuming more. And at the same time, you also come to know your performance, that is, whether it is, so you can see as the air conditioning is more, the EPI is also higher, 55. Yet as compared to global standards, these are not very high. We can also see other things such as, whether your ACs, whether they are star rated, non-star rated, whether you have, what type of lighting you have, what is the distribution, the lighting power density, how much it fits in with the standards, whether your natural lighting is within the standards of NBC or not. So we do this 9-point grid system in which we calculate whether these are the areas which are complying with it or not. And also this fire safety, which does not fall into green audit, but it is very much a part of energy audits, electrical safety. That's the first thing that we look at. So this is also something that can be included in Green Campus. In terms of feasibility, we actually give you that if you have to change from this lighting to this lighting, this will give you this kind of output in terms of lumens, and what is the cost, what is the fee, what is the payback. This is the feasibility that is given. Similarly, if you want to shift from a single flush to a dual flush, what is the cost, what is the amount of water that you save, and even giving you full kind of design for a rainwater harvesting system. For example, here you have percolation pits, you have rainwater downtake pipes, you have storage devices, and so on. And as an example here, okay, the main things that you can do in your first phase in terms of your energy saving and in terms of your payback is just 1 year and 4 months. So you know that whatever you invest, you will recover within 1 year and 4 months. There are also various approaches you can take in terms of continuous training, monitoring, research projects, and also various things like eco champions and eco clubs within. Lastly, a few case studies. The first one I'm showing you is actually a college building where thermal comfort, I talked about thermal comfort right in the beginning, was an issue. And so we redesigned the interiors of this college building using something called dry walls, high albedo paint in the roof, radiant barrier under deck insulation, because that was a major source of heat gain and discomfort for the occupants, and these turbo ventilators. And spatially also we took some measures such as increasing the window wall ratio and so on. And this is the pre and post. I'm just showing you how we increase the ventilation. Of course, we did all the testing pre and post. This is a cross section of the roof showing how the thermal transmittance was changed for something like 4.64 watts per meter square Kelvin to 0.03 watts. So that's a drastic reduction in the thermal transmission of the roof, and therefore the indoor MRT, the main radiant temperature changes. These are all pictures before and after, and these are, and this is how this is the picture, and this is the results that we got. Pre and post retrofit results was that the roof bottom temperature was almost 12.6 degrees centigrade lower, and that helped in the overall thermal comfort inside the building. The second example of a good retrofit, energy retrofit, is the Empire State Building. Everybody must have heard of it in New York. This is a building which is a high-rise building built in the 1930s with, at that time, no consideration for energy efficiency. But now it's an energy guzzler. So what did they do? They organized a company called Rocky Mountain Institute to do they change the entire fabric of the building. So various measures were taken, and one of the measures here I want to show you, building windows. About 6,500 windows of the building were changed from single glazing to triple glazing, and they were able to achieve close to 40% reduction of the energy and carbon dioxide savings, and that is significant for a building of this type. So now this entire building is retrofitted. This is another example. Potter School of Environment in Tel Aviv University is part of Tel Aviv University, but this is a school of environment, and their entire building has green features. Like this wall on the south-facing wall is entirely made of solar vacuum panels, which provides the air cooling system. In addition, they have a natural ventilation system as well. This is the roof, which is an urban garden. In addition, they have a solar chimney. Then you can see the recycled furniture, and the building also treats its own water right in front of the building using those natural wastewater treatment systems. This was a project which I had undertaken in an Anganwadi and school in Bahupura, Gujarat, where I worked with an Israeli industrial designer, Tamar. And we were this whole process was also very interesting because we did it with the students, and what kind of building they need and local resources and so on, and made it as eco-friendly. So it included all of these points like rainwater harvesting too. You can see everything was made into these buildings. So that was the final case study, and I would like to conclude today, being World Environment Day, that being green is more than just selecting eco products. It is your own commitment to sustainability or a sustainable lifestyle. So we may change products, we may change the technologies to good and efficient technologies, but as long it should be your own internal commitment to a sustainable lifestyle that would matter and would make the change. So I think that is something we can do each and every single day, and that would make a big change if all of us do it. One of the things is reducing our footprint. For example, this is a concept that is also gaining, going into smaller houses, smaller footprint. It's called small is beautiful. And lastly, giving back to the environment by making everything net zero, energy, waste, and water, move towards net zero. Thank you. That was the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roshni. You have spoken and highlighted and analyzed panoply of issues relating to climate change and how as a campus we can undertake mitigation and adaptation measures whereby we can make small contribution to avert the disaster which is taking place on a planetary scale. Now the forum is open for questions. Students as well as faculty, if you have questions, please put the questions in the chat box. So it will be easier for us to convey those questions to Dr. Roshni. Ma'am, one question I would like to ask, means within the institution measures can be taken, but as we have gone online, but there is issue like the notes that we give and the tons of photocopies, it also contributes in a way to what we can call as a greenhouse gases. So what are the measures whereby we can provide notes to the students, but at the same time reduce that wastage of paper?
I guess that you can stop making the photocopies. You can just give the online documents. And these days, as I was showing you, PDFs, make everything into PDFs and share it. So the students also get online, and they can also refer, because today we are all not printing anymore because we are sitting at home, and even things like invoices and letters and everything has become online. So I guess I know that traditionally school is always associated with the actual physical books and paper, but I guess we have to change that mentality and refer to online documents. I mean, for people like us, it is still difficult to do that shift because we've been used to it. But I think the younger generation, people in schools and colleges now, for them reading online is not that difficult.
There is question from Professor Sharmila Jajodia. What about the e-waste we generate? I think we means as a college she is referring to.
So yes, college generates a lot of e-waste. So I have even seen complexes where what they do is in every tables, like every couple of tables together, they put one small bin, which is called as an e-bin. So if you have a staff office, or if you have an administrative office, you have one at least small bin. So whatever small e-waste comes, you just deposit into that. And so that should be like a process, that a phenomenon that we should introduce. And of course, at a larger scale, there are things like computers which are not working anymore, gadgets, and so on, which for which we should dedicate a certain storage space, either in the college or a certain, like an extra box or something that is created. I know of companies like EcoReco, for example, who have set up some kind of arrangement with the institute where they collect the e-waste. There are many companies today, we can share those details with you. And these companies, they collect the e-waste on a regular basis because they recycle things like keyboards, things like even your mobile phones. And with your mobile phones also, there are nowadays, with the global move towards circular economy, there is a commitment by all companies like Samsung, Nokia, and most of these, that of buyback, or when you buy a new phone, you give your old phone, and the company takes it back eventually, because they use the components for newer phones. So one should be aware of these, and sort of make an effort towards recycling the waste, and not throwing it, definitely not throwing it into your waste bin, because ultimately that will end up in the dumping ground, which will cause a lot of damage. So there can be lots of things that can be done with by just simply tying up with local vendors and providing space for collection.
Hello. Uh, Ma'am, there is a question by Dr. Kiran Kolwankar. The books that we use, like for instance, textbook which we read again and again, wouldn't it be better to read it in the print form rather than reading it on the computer, which where there will be a continuous consumption of electricity?
That is true. So there can be some kind of a balance here. So some things we can still continue to do the printing, and some things we can shift. So the things like which are not being used on a long-term basis, which are simply notes or something, we can have them on an electronic format. But textbooks, which can be referred by me by us for many years or something, those can still be in the print form. So there can be a balance in, especially in the educational educational scenario, that we have a combination of these things. Certainly we will need some things still in the print format, and just like e-vehicles, they can be addressed by having better sources of wood, etc., in those cases. So there can be a balance there.
Dr. Nilambari Kulkarni has a question. She's asking, one question which students always ask is, whenever we think of eco-friendly practices, we replace plastic with paper or wood. So what can be more effective alternative for plastic?
I never agreed with the idea of using paper, because generally, paper bags, they're used once, twice, and then again they're thrown away, because especially when it comes to using something wet, they do not, they do not help us much, and they do not last as much. So I would think of those old cloth bags that we had before. Those are, something that is washable and reusable. So I would think cloth is definitely an alternative. Even plastic bags which are not single use, like the only reason we are against uh, plastic is because of the thin plastics with very, very small micron plastics, which are causing damage, because they deteriorate very fast, go into the ground. So make sure at least that when you're buying things, those plastics are not used. You can use plastic bags which you can reuse, wash and reuse many times. So that is not bad. So option to plastic is plastic itself. You can use reusable plastic bags which you can use many times, as well as you can use cloth, which is you can wash and use it.
A student Brijesh Chaudhary has a question that reading a PDF document on mobile or computer can cause several health problems to the students. So balancing environmental issues and health issues, it becomes sometimes a zero-sum game.
That's true. That's true. I guess we will have to come up with solutions. Like I guess there are these days equipments. For example, even in our own phones, I have a mode in which the blue light is not emitted. So if one is aware of these things and is careful not to read things in the night, or as I said, if it's a long-term document which you can use, which you need for your lifetime, or which will be used for a long time, those can certainly be printed and can be kept for the use. But there has to be some kind of decision on how much of course you cannot read everything. One is you can look at better mode, not read on a continuous basis. It can damage your eyes as well as your posture, etc. So a series of measures can be taken, both from the technological point of view, behavioral point of view, and so on.
Any more questions from the participants? I think that was all the questions participants had, and I am assuming that all the doubts related to issues like greenhouse and other things have been clarified. And I would request Dr. Nilambari Madam to please give a vote of thanks.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Thank you, Roshni Madam, for this informative and enlightening session, not only for the students, but also for the teachers and members of IKSC team. You have touched upon the various areas in detail about green campus, like zero waste concept or water effective measures and carbon footprint offsetting, etc. And you have also explained the technical part of paperless office, and at the end, very interesting case studies. And during the interaction with students, you have also introduced the concept of balanced approach about paper use. I sincerely thank you for sparing your valuable time and engaging this session. On behalf of Hindu Vidya Pratyek Samiti's Ram Niranjan Jhunjhunwala College, IKSC team, students and teachers, I thank you sincerely, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roshni Madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
DP sir, you can end the meeting.